Okay, I want to introduce you to Rick Morse. He's going to be doing the presentation for the webinar today. Rick, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Well, first of all, thanks to everyone for attending today. What we're going to talk about is forecast accuracy primarily, and you know, how to improve it and the impact of it on your sales and your overall profitability. So I'll start off with a little introduction to Thrive for those of you that aren't familiar with who we are and what we do, and then we can dive more into you know, what are the benefits of forecast accuracy and why it's worthwhile to go ahead and you know, evaluate it and invest the time in it to try to improve it. We'll talk about some of the challenges, some of the key challenges that we see companies face in trying to improve their forecast accuracy and their demand forecasting. Some of our, you know, we'll end up with some of our recommendations, and then we'll, as Gary mentioned, we'll go ahead and open it up for open discussion and questions and answers. So a little bit about Thrive. We're the leading provider of cloud-based inventory optimization systems to distribution companies, both wholesale and master distributors. So we specialize in really the distribution space. And so, you know, we've been doing this since 2001, and you know, that's allowed us to develop a lot of domain expertise in this area of inventory management, improving inventory performance and profitability for distribution companies. We've been honored to have been recognized by a lot of the leading supply chain and industry you know, associations, and we're also proud to say that a lot of these awards that we've received have been based on nominations from our current clients. Here are some of our, you know, some selected customers, just to give you an idea of what kind of companies we tend to work with. So distributors in the PVF, pipes, valves, and fittings, plumbing, electrical, automotive parts, tire distribution, food service, HVAC, building supplies. So that gives you an idea of some of the industries in which we're pretty active. And then some of our partnerships here on the right-hand side. So obviously we're you know, we've been active in the TUG community for the last couple of years. We're also involved in the, you know, a couple of the Epicor ones, the Eclipse Users Group, the Profit 21 Users Group, and then we're involved in several of the different distribution associations like Southern Wholesalers, North Central Wholesalers, Associated Building Material Distributors, and then we're partnered with, you know, a few different other technology vendors that also tend to focus in the distribution space. So, you know, when we talk about forecast accuracy with companies, there's some common questions that come up. The first question is it worth the effort to increase our forecast accuracy? You know, so in other words, what are the benefits? You know, why is it worth looking at? You know, what exactly is it that you're talking about here? So there have been some studies that have been done. So, for example, the Supply Chain Council did an analysis of 67 companies, and they found that there was definitely a correlation between higher forecast accuracy that you can see on this axis here, and higher fill rates. So the companies that had higher forecast accuracy, in other words, they did a better job predicting what their upcoming sales were for each of their SKUs at each of their locations, they tended to have higher fill rates. So on the, from another dimension, they also found, this was another study that was done by the Aberdeen Group, and they found that there was a correlation between higher forecast accuracy and reduced inventory as measured by days of sales, or days of supply. So not only, if you're increasing your fill rates, obviously you're going to increase your sales, reduce your back orders. If you're improving you're reducing your inventory, then that impacts the capital that you have to invest in your profitability. So you're actually able to improve fill rates and reduce inventory at the same time by investing the time to start trying to improve your forecast accuracy. So it's definitely worth the effort. The second question that we commonly get is, what areas of your business do most companies have room for improvement? So here are the three main challenges where we see companies struggle. So usually with your A items, your best-selling items, your most important items, companies tend to do a good job with those. They tend to be higher volume. They tend to be smoother selling type of demand. Just using the SX system or some other, any other ERP system typically handles these pretty well. They're fairly predictable. Where you run into challenges is once you get outside of that set of your A items. So as you get into your B items, your C items, your D items, you get into items that are much less predictable. So items with lower volume, items with what we call intermittent demand. So you might sell one, in a particular month, and then you might not sell anything for months, and then you might sell 4. Those obviously are much more difficult to forecast. So let's talk about each of these here individually. In terms of improving non-A items, so we've worked with a company called Keystone Automotive. So they're a $600 million automotive distributor out of Pennsylvania. And as you can see here, this is what their distribution network looks like. They stock 350,000 items at 4 national warehouses. And one of the biggest challenges they had, and they told us when we started having conversations, was that for those of you that have been involved in automotive parts before, you're, I'm sure, aware of this, but a very high percentage of their SKU population exhibits intermittent demand. So if you think about it, if you've got a 75 Chevrolet Camaro and you need spark plugs, you kind of expect that somebody's going to have those in stock. So these large automotive parts distributors have to stock a lot of old model types of parts, and it's just the expectation in the industry. So, I'm sure that each of you guys, because you're having to stock thousands of SKUs, tens of thousands of SKUs, are going to have, some percentage of your SKU population that is this, intermittent demand, difficult to predict demand. So what Keystone did was they engaged us, and it was a competitive situation, and so we had to compete, with some other forecasting vendors, and they gave us a slice of their data, and we had to create some forecasts. And this is kind of what they discovered when they used our system and evaluated the results. So one of the biggest things they were trying to overcome was that they felt like their buyers were just spending way too much time evaluating forecasts, evaluating the orders, using their existing processes, using their ERP system. And so what you'll see in this graph is that in these red columns, these are the percentages of SKUs that with their previous system, the buyers were having to override the numbers. So you can see, there were some pretty large percentages. They were just spending an inordinate amount of time every week trying to evaluate the numbers and overriding them just with their own human judgment, right? So I mean, 65%, 25%, 9%, 32%. And then once they took a look at our system, obviously the buyers were much more comfortable with the forecasts that Thrive was generating. And so then you can see that the override count went down quite a bit. So here 3%, 6%, 1%, 2%. So, at least, in terms of the eye test for the buyers, they were obviously much more comfortable with our numbers. And keep in mind, the vast majority of the SKUs that they were overriding were these SKUs that had this intermittent type of demand. So that gives you just kind of an idea of what our forecasting engine can do in terms of improving your forecast accuracy on that section of difficult to forecast items. So let's talk about the second challenge that we see, which is seasonality. Some businesses are going to have obvious heavy seasonality. So HVAC distributors, building supply distributors, obviously going to have a lot of seasonal patterns with what they sell. But what we found is that most companies have some element of seasonality in their business, and are often surprised to find that certain categories of SKUs that they sell have strong seasonal patterns that they weren't aware of. So we can actually let's pull up the Thrive app for a second, and I'll use it as a prop and kind of show you an example of a seasonal SKU. So we've actually logged into the Thrive application. You can see it's a browser-based application. You can use any current browser to access the system with your login and password. So I've pulled up a specific SKU at a specific branch, and so this is the forecast detail page. And so we dedicate an entire page of the app to specifically analyzing and exhibiting the sales history of a SKU for a location, and as well as the forecast. So I could look at any particular SKU at any branch that I want and look at the forecast napkins and linens and sheets and things like that. So this is a pink napkin, but you may not think intuitively that it would have strong seasonal patterns, but here you can see that it indeed really does. They really don't sell it much between July and December, and then it sells heavily starting in January, and then building up to the April-May time frame, probably around Mother's Day or some holidays where they sell a lot of pink napkins. So we could look at the graph for it and see that it does exist. It does exhibit quite a bit of seasonal patterns. Let me refresh this SKU here. So we can see here in the graph that the green line is demand from 2 years ago. The blue line is demand over the last 12 months. The yellow line is demand from 3 years ago. And then you can see where the Thrive forecasting engine is tracking right along with this strong seasonal pattern. So, in the past, they've sold heavily, in the May time frame, and then so the Thrive forecasting engine then is predicting that going forward. So, this prediction capability of actually predicting for every SKU, 12 months into the future, and then actually being able to, as accurately as possible, predict what your sales are going to be in the future, pays big dividends when you're ordering for this, for this item. So, to talk about another experience that we've had in a case study, Macanorca is a distributor of pipes, valves, and fittings based in New York. And so they were, prior to using the Thrive system, they were using their ERP system and found that they were constantly stocking out of items as they were going into a season. And then they found that they had too much inventory coming out of a season. So you know, if we look at our app again and think about how that works. So the time frame that we're in with this demo data is like the beginning of July. So if you look at the forecast, you know, right now it's starting to forecast out from July through August, September, and October. So, you know, if we were using, let's say, you know, if our ERP system was set to use some type of moving average that was backwards looking, you know, it would see all this heavy volume, all these heavy sales that we've sold recently, and, you know, if we relied on that, it might tend to buy very heavily, you know, moving forward, which would be, this would not be the right time to be buying heavily, obviously. So that's where that prediction capability is really important, that it be able to accurately identify, and our system does this automatically, where we see year-on-year sales history, it'll automatically identify these seasonal patterns and then provide you a meaningful prediction of it going forward. Because then obviously, you know, depending on your lead times, you'd want to start buying heavily again. You know, probably, let's say that you only have a month lead times or less, you know, in the December time frame is really when you want to start buying heavily again to start stocking up and preparing for this upcoming season. You know, if you were using some type of moving average, you know, and some type of usage number, and if your order points were relying on that, then actually, you know, you would not be buying anything at this time. So what Magna-Norca found was that, you know, this was occurring a lot, where it was understated the amount of demand and the amount of inventory they would need to buy, you know, going into their season, and then by the time their ERP system caught up, they were already in season, and it was not really the time to buy. You know, they should actually be slowing down the buying and allowing that inventory to burn off. So by using the Thrive system, they were able to increase their forecast accuracy to 95%, which allowed them to reduce their inventory by 30 months after 14 months of using the Thrive system. And at the same time, you know, as we saw in the in the charts earlier on in the presentation, while they were reducing inventory, they were also able to simultaneously improve their fill rate. So the third challenge that we see, you know, and some of you might have this and some of you may not, but for those of you that import, you'll definitely be able to relate to this. You know, so if we look at this graphically, if you've got long lead times, you know, let's say your lead times are 3 months or longer, then if this, you know, point right here is today, then, you know, and this is the lead time that it takes for your product to come in, then you're not buying for this time frame. You know, you're actually looking out here to determine what you need to buy, because that's when your product's going to come in, right? So if once again, if we go back to our application, now let's compound the seasonal issue with the long lead time. Let's say that this is an import item. So now it's even trickier to buy correctly for, right? So this is where the forecast accuracy really pays big dividends. So if we're buying now, you know, in the July time frame, we're not buying for you know, July, August, September. Let's say we have 3-month lead times. You know, we're really starting to buy for like the November, December time frame, and then you know, when the season starts, you know, when our demand starts to build in this January time frame, you know, we're really going to need to start buying for that, you know, probably back here in October or the end of September. So that's really where, you know, your current system's ability to predict, you know, even pretty far out into the future in a relatively accurate and usable and meaningful way really makes a big difference on, you know, your ability to stock properly at the right time and at the right places, and to capture those sales without having too much inventory. So, you know, if that all makes sense, then what companies will say a lot of times is, well, you know, how do we know what our current forecast accuracy is? And then if we do measure it, how do we know, and you know, how do we know if we're improving it? So I've actually written an article that was published in the Supply House Times, and I'll give you our email addresses and phone numbers at the end of this presentation. So please reach out to us if you'd like a copy of this. But in it, I go over some of the stuff I've gone over in this presentation. So some of the benefits that have been studied and analyzed about improving your forecast accuracy. But then I also go into how you do it. So, what type of information you need to get out of the SX system, what type of reporting, storing the usage numbers and then capturing then the actual sales after the month. And then I actually even give you some formulas that you can use in a spreadsheet to at least figure out where you are right now. And what we typically recommend is that you pick maybe a couple, 2 or 3 different lines and just do it with that. You don't have to do it with your whole, database. Just pick 2 or 3 lines, maybe one of your higher volume ones, maybe one if it's seasonal, one maybe that's kind of mid or lower volume, but it's still an important vendor. And then, measure the accuracy of your existing processes, of your, however you're doing it now, and then you'll be able to gauge, what type of improvement you'll be able to make and whether it would make sense for you to even evaluate, a system like Thrive's. So, once again, I'll show you our contact information at the end of the presentation, and then please feel free to reach out to us and request this article, and we'll be happy to send that to you. From our own analyses, I can kind of share with you what we found. So, we've done some analyses, versus some of the leading ERP systems that are used by distribution companies. And in this particular case, we had the company send us the forecast. Let's say that this was in February, and so in January we said, hey, go ahead and give us the usage numbers that you're getting out of your ERP system, that you're going to be buying for February with, and then so they gave us those for their items. And then we went ahead and got their sales history at the same time, and we ran forecasts using the Thrive system. And then at the end of February, then we had them send us their actual demand, and then we did a comparison. So then we've kind of stack ranked these by most unit volume. So this first item here is the one that sold the most, measured by unit volume. And so you can see, it sold 6,000 units. The Thrive system had forecast 4,600 units. So we were about 76% accurate. For whatever reason, the ERP system had forecast nothing. And it could have been that, this was a seasonal item. It could, whatever, for whatever reason, that it wasn't, generating a usage number for that. So the ERP system was actually 0% accurate. And then, we can kind of go down the line here. The second highest volume item, Thrive, had forecast 3,675, so we were at 73% accurate. The ERP system forecast just under 1,700 units, so it was about 33% accurate. So, you can kind of go down, the list and kind of compare them. For whatever reason, the ERP system, the settings were set where, it had what we would call a low bias. So it was underestimating demand, in really all of these cases that we see here. So Thrive was underestimating some demand here as well. You can see we're not beyond the actual demand they had either. So maybe they were, like we said, they were kind of in a growth pattern or going into a season. So we had a little bit of lag, but certainly not like the ERP system did. And so at an aggregate level, if you measure it, then Thrive's forecast accuracy was 98%. The ERP system, so 35%. What we typically see and what we do for our customers, the Thrive system will generate a forecast accuracy report. So we actually will measure it. Our system will measure its performance itself, and this goes out by email to whatever whatever people you'd want to get the email, at the end of every month. And so they would be able to make sure and kind of monitor for themselves, how accurate Thrive's predictions have been tracking. So you can see here, at an aggregate level, here was the actual demand for last month. Here was what the forecast was. So the Thrive system was 96%. I don't know if any of you guys incorporate sales forecasts or do any type of sales and operations planning where you get sales input to maybe, help the buyers, if they just landed a new customer, or if there's, some promotional activity, trade show or something going on where they know that there's going to be, increased sales, maybe they just, a customer's just starting a new project. But that's another way that we've seen that you can increase your forecast accuracy. So if you can work out a process where, you're getting meaningful feedback from the salespeople, and usually there's some process of filtering it out and managing it and manipulating it somewhat. But then if you're getting good feedback back, that can definitely improve your forecast accuracy, and that's actually what we see here. So the Thrive system, just based on the actual raw data, was 96% accurate. But then in the plan, which is the adjusted forecast, the sales reps had actually bumped up some of the forecasts and were actually able to improve the overall accuracy. So then, this is the 3-month, rolling. Thrive was at 95% accurate for over 3 months, and then with the sales adjustments, they were at, we're at 96%. So this is the type of report that comes out, at the end of every month, where we, are measuring our own forecast accuracy. But so that's really our recommendation, to you guys at this point, is that if possible, we always recommend that, you measure how you're doing right now. So you get a copy of this article, kind of go through it. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. We'd be happy to help you. But if you can kind of see how good your predictions are right now, how good your usage numbers are at being able to predict upcoming demand, and especially if you have you have some of the characteristics that we talked about today, some of the lower volume, intermittent demand, seasonal patterns, or import product, then certainly these improving your forecast accuracy is going to pay big dividends for you. And so really, Gary, that's the presentation. At this point, we can open it up for questions and answers and go from there.
Okay, let's give it a minute, and if anybody has a question, now would be the time to type it in, or if you want to raise your hand, I'll be looking for anybody with their hand raised. I don't have any questions just yet, though.
While we're doing that, I promised that I would give you our contact information. If anybody did want that article that I mentioned, or has any follow-up questions and doesn't want to, present it in the group format, feel free to reach out to us. Jim Colassa and Bill Neer are 2 reps that work with the the TUG community. And then also, here's my contact information as well. I'm Rick Morris. So these are our phone numbers and our email addresses. So please feel free to jot this down and reach out to one of us if you like a copy of that article or would like more information.
Okay, we do have one question. How does this integrate with SX.e? And while you're at it, Rick, you might also talk about A+ and FACS, because I think all 3 of these are represented here.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I can kind of take you through. I think I've got a slide, actually. Let me see if I can bring it up here. So this is basically the process. So we have integration built up with your ERP system, be it SX.e or A+ or fax. It doesn't really matter. So we would go ahead and have an interface set up. So for SX.e, for example, we would connect with the product, your progress database. There's a nightly feed, and then there's also a weekend feed. And so on the weekend interface, our stuff sits in SQL Server, in a SQL Server database. And so we would get your sales transactions, and we actually will hold sales history for the last 3 years for every actively stocked SKU that you have at every stocking location. So every warehouse or hub, every branch. And then on the weekend, the Thrive engine, the forecast engine, we've got a patent pending forecast engine that'll run every weekend and redoes the forecast for every single SKU at every location. And then on the nightly process, then we would actually get your current stock status. So we would get your, and there's a couple options here. So really today I've been focused on the forecasting. So if you want, we can really just do the forecasting for you, and then we would just send you back forecast numbers that would then get imported back into your ERP system, be it SX.e or A+ or fax, and then you would use that instead of the usage number that's being generated right now, and then you would still use your order points, and still everything else on the buying side would remain the same. The other option is that we can also do the replenishment for you. So in that case, then we would get your stock status. In other words, we would get your on hand. We would get your whatever POs, the PO details, whatever you cut, your receipts, all that type of information, and then the Thrive replenishment would calculate your safety stock. It does daily. It generates alerts, and then we can actually create a suggested PO that then would go back into your Infor system, and then you would actually cut the actual PO from there, and then we send we either transmit the data back into your database, or we send you a file that you would import back into your ERP system, and then you actually would cut the actual PO and or transfer order out of your existing Infor system.
Okay.
Hopefully that answered the question.
I started. Definitely covers the basic flow of it. Another question came in. What's the ballpark cost of Thrive? So you might talk about how your pricing works.
Sure. So the way that the pricing structure is, it varies from company to company, but since we're a cloud-based system, it's a monthly fee. So there's a monthly fee, and then there's an initial startup cost. So the startup cost, starts at like $25,000–$30,000, and then and what we do with that is we, of course, we set up the integration. We set up your instance on our hosted servers, and then the implementation process. We go through an extensive survey with your senior management team, with your buying team, to understand, how you're buying right now, any intricacies of what you're doing. Are there vendor minimums? Do you have some import vendors? What are your lead times? And then, how frequently are you buying right now? We would meet with the senior management team to understand if there are strategic goals. Are they trying to increase turns? Are you trying to reduce inventory? Are you trying to improve service levels? Or it might be some combination of all those. Some companies are not really, that motivated to reduce inventory. They feel like they're okay there. They're really motivated to reduce the lost sales they're experiencing and improve their fill rates and service levels. So we go through that process. Then we go through an iterative process with you where we're able to do simulations in the system, and we can generate the forecasts for you, and so then we can provide those back, and make sure the buying team is comfortable with those and that they make sense, and then we can make any tweaks that we need to. If we're doing the replenishment for you as well, then we can actually generate what we're going to hold in terms of inventory and do a simulation on that and provide that back to the buying team and senior management to make sure that everyone's comfortable with what the system, where the system is driving your inventory. So that's all part of the implementation process and why you pay the setup fee. The monthly fee can range anywhere starting from a couple $1,000s a month to on up from there, depending on how many SKUs you have, you stock, how many buyers you have, how many stocking locations there are. So if you have any interest at all, feel free to reach out to us and we can give you more specifics based on your company information.
Okay, thank you for that. So here's a different kind of question. We are a MRO distributor. More than half of our sales are unplanned, non-loaded items. What is the value for forecast planning for a distributor like us?
That's a great question. So obviously, the other half that's not unplanned, I'm sure you guys can see where what I talked about today, probably would help you. On the unplanned stuff, then what we would, one thing to recommend there is to get that sales input. So we provide tools to help you with that too. So we've got an S&OP product that can help you with that. Let me see if I can bring that up. So I can give you an example of what that looks like. So for example, in this particular case, the way we've structured it is that this is kind of demo data of that would be representative of a pretty big company. So they've got 1, 2, 3, 7 warehouses kind of across the country. And so the way they do it is that these are the sales reps here. Sales reps are working with particular customers, so I could drill down into a specific sales rep, and now you can see the customers underneath it, and so then I could even drill down to this customer. And so, in this warehouse, in the Georgia warehouse, for Steve Collenbach for the Alsco account, here's the items that we sell. These are Thrive's forecasts. These are Thrive's statistical predictions for what you're going to sell. So now, since this is kind of unplanned sales, then there's going to be, this at least gives you a starting point. So then if you can get the reps to get feedback from the customers and to provide feedback, they can come in and make overrides into the data, and they can, with their own intelligence of what's really going to sell, what's coming down the pipeline. Then you can use these numbers. We roll these numbers back up, to the item at the at the branch or the warehouse that can then be used for for buying purposes. So you probably have some manual process like this right now, or else you're just having to try to react real fast. But if you're trying to get it in advance, then you already have some manual process by which you're trying to get some feedback from the salespeople of what what sales are coming down the pipeline, so you can get the stuff ordered. So this is kind of a way of how we help to automate that process.
Okay, one other question here. Actually, two others. Excuse the doorbell. What is the frequency of buying that Thrive Forecasting is set up for?
Good question. Yeah, so it's flexible, so it's configurable. Because every company is going to have different, what we call order cycles. So, and even within your own company, you might have some lines that you buy, maybe once a month, maybe once every other month, maybe, once a week, every other week, maybe daily, a couple times a week. So whatever the cycle, you can configure that in the Thrive system. So that's part of the implementation process that we help, we understand for each buy line what that cycle is right now. and then we can go ahead and set that up in the system so that it can be the same cycle. Now, I will tell you that we've seen it with customers before that where their process was so labor intensive when they would try to buy that they could only place an order once a month. After implementing the Thrive system then, because we're automating a lot of the forecasting and stuff like that, and the buyers aren't having to override as many of the numbers like we discussed before, then it's freeing up the buyer's time to where, and it's reducing the time that it takes to put orders together, so that they can now start placing orders where it makes sense, where there's enough volume. They could start placing orders like twice a month, and then doing that, as I'm sure you guys realize, if you're able to cut orders twice a month instead of once a month, it brings down your inventory and drives up your turns. So that's one of the advantages, one of the benefits that we can provide. But basically, whatever your order cycle is right now, we typically will try to set it up on the same cycles, and then as you progress, we may make recommendations to you that you might even be able to shorten some of those order cycles.
Okay. Another question, is the forecast horizon fixed at 12 months, or is that a configurable setting?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Jay?
Is the forecast horizon fixed at 12 months, or is that a configurable setting?
So is it fixed at 12 months? We actually generate a forecast 24 months into the future, but we really only show you the 12-month forecast. I don't know if your thought was to shorten the horizon or to extend it. It is nice to at least have a 12-month horizon, because one of the things that you can do, it just helps you with the planning process. So even if you have short lead times, it's nice to be able to have the predictions going out that far. Just from a management standpoint, this is what I'm showing you now is the roll-up of the forecast for the next 12 months. So I'm looking at the whole company right now, but I could look at that by product category, or by warehouse or branch, or by buyer, or by vendor, or by velocity code, your ABC code. So if I pulled it up for like let's say a warehouse, I could we can also give you predictions or forecasts in different units of measure. So it might be helpful to see like the cube, your max cube requirements for a particular warehouse or branch over the next 12 months. The other thing the 12-month planning provides is that we're not just if we're doing your replenishment as well, we're not just doing the forecast for the next 12 months, but we're also doing the replenishment plan. And where that comes in handy is that if you've got, you might have a situation where maybe you're owned by a parent company, and you want to be able to provide them with information about what you're going to be buying from them, over the next 12 months. You might have a couple of key vendors that you could collaborate with, and you could share with them, what you're going to be, buying from them, what you're planning to buy from them over the next 12 months. And we've had customers that have actually done that and been able to reduce, the vendor's been able to reduce the lead time to them because, you're actually helping them with their planning process. So, we actually forecast beyond 12 months. Like I said, we actually forecast 24 months out, but yeah, typically we'll show the 12-month forecast. Hopefully that answered the question.
Okay. Does your system recommend order as needed products that should be set to stock? And does it recommend overstocked items that should be returned to the vendor?
Yes. Yep. So good questions. So two questions. So yeah, we can help you also manage. Let me bring up a different data set. So we can help you to manage those, by, order it as you sell it type of items. And typically the way we'll manage those is that, if, on the replenishment side, there's some settings that would be set for those particular SKUs. And if they can come across with a code from SX as, these are my, we don't stock these actively. We only, buy them when, when someone buys them. Then what we would do is we would set, now what we're looking at is the replenishment detail screen for, once again, a specific SKU at a specific branch. And so we can actually, if it can come across as a, basically a non-stock, or, only buy when, when we have a customer order, then we can go ahead and automatically have these settings set up in the system. But it would basically turn the safety stock off, and then it would set the, what we call the consume rule, to only buy, not to buy off the statistical forecast. Instead, it would just buy off of customer sales only. So then as you saw a sale, or even if there was booked orders out in the future, the system would go ahead and generate an order for that. So that's how, a common way that we handle those types of items. In terms of the second part of that question, can we make recommendations to you? And can we provide reports to you for items that should be returned to the vendor because you're not selling them? Yeah, we definitely can do that as well. So let me take off these filters. This is actually the status list. This is the first screen that the buyers see when they log into the system. So these are the actual suggested POs here on the left. These are SKU alerts here. But one of the alerts that we can provide to you is like, an item hasn't sold in the last 12 months, let's say. And then we can either provide that as an alert there in the system, or we can provide that as reporting. So we can tell you, where you're overstocked. We can tell you, items that haven't sold in, the last 12 months, the last 6 months. So, whatever your criteria is for picking those items where you'd want to return your on-hand inventory to the manufacturer, yeah, we could set those up as either an alert or a report. This is also good for just your stocking decisions in general, for what you should stock and what you might want to turn to non-stock. If you haven't sold something in 12 months and it's currently, coded as a stocking item, you can review this and see, and you might want to, not stock these and turn these into special order type items.
Okay. One more question. Does the software include an inventory optimization module along with the forecasting module?
Okay. So inventory optimization is kind of a broad term, but here's some of the stuff that we do, that I guess is in the realm of inventory optimization. So we can analyze your demand, because we're grabbing your sales transactions from SX and analyzing that, and so we've got like zip code, where the actual demand occurred from, so we can map that to the proper warehouse or branch. A lot of times what will happen is that maybe you didn't have it. The demand actually originated in a particular location, the territory for a particular location, but you didn't have it there, so you shipped it out of somewhere else. What you don't want to do is then, for forecasting in the future, you don't want to map that demand. You don't want to have that demand out of the shipping location, right? Because that's not really where the demand was from. So we can remap that to the proper location to make sure that we're not perpetuating that issue going forward in the forecast. So you really want your demand geographically and timing-wise to be in the right place at the right time so that the forecast can be as accurate as possible. The other things that we can do for you, we're constantly, the system is constantly evaluating how much inventory you have, not just in units but also in dollars and in time supply. So we break it down for you. I'm kind of showing you the management dashboard now, but you can. What this is showing you is trends over the last 12 months. So I can see for the total data set, for all my SKUs at all my locations, how things have performed. So for example, this is our on hand. Right now we've got $26 million, which is about 20 weeks of supply. This particular data set is a heavily import data, so they tend to have to stock, a higher weeks of supply than those of you out there that are wholesalers. But 6 months ago we were at 19 weeks of supply. Then we went down to 18 weeks of supply 3 months ago. Now we're up to 22, so maybe we're building up in front of the season. We also break down the inventory for you in different types of what we call the Thrive inventory stack, which is the 3 reasons that we hold inventory for you. So, safety stock, in Thrive's vernacular, in Thrive's terms, we define safety stock as strictly stock that we hold to protect you against demand volatility. So in other words, because we're also measuring our forecast error, we know the items that are unpredictable, and then, depending on what service levels you want to maintain for those SKUs that we have and what lead times you have, we're going to have to hold a certain amount of safety stock to protect you against, that sales unpredictability. Lead time stock is obviously, to cover you for the amount of time it takes you from the time you cut a PO to the time it comes in. Order cycle stock we talked about is how frequently you're buying inventory. So, some is weekly, some is daily, or every other week or monthly. So we're able to, in terms of inventory optimization, we can help you to drive these numbers, and so our system can do analysis of how you can improve these numbers, and that's another example of what we do optimization. If I missed the specific thought that you had on optimization, please feel free to reach out to me, and I can answer that question more specifically.
Okay, Rick, that's the end of the questions. I don't see anybody's hand raised, so I think this is probably a good cutting off point.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate everyone's time. Gary, thanks as always. Let me bring up our contact info one more time, in case people didn't get it. But yeah, if anybody has any follow-up questions, or if I didn't answer any questions, specifically, please feel free to reach out to me or to one of the reps, and we would be happy to have further conversations.
Great. All right. Thank you very much, Rick. Good presentation. Everybody have a good day.
Thanks.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.